And we are live, Emma. Hi, good
Hooray!
morning.
Hello, hello. It's lovely to see you again.
It's lovely to see you too. How are you today?
I am all right. I'm
Can
all
you
right.
can you share with us where you are hailing from?
So I am just outside Reading, which is west of London.
Okay.
That's in the UK. In the UK.
So a notion apart from here. So for me, it's morning. For
Yeah.
you, not so much.
No, we are. It's just gone 3 in the afternoon.
Okay, good. I think maybe some people on your side can be watching this at the end of their lunch. Here, it's more of a morning thing. In any case, I'm super happy to have you here. Uh, things seem to be going well. Let me see here on LinkedIn if the live is going well, and if it is, we will start the recording. Um, it was a pleasure being on your podcast, the PhD Life Raft, and it's great to have you here today. And yeah, the life is going well. Perfect. And to have you here and to be able to hear about your mission of helping, of inspiring, and of supporting the PhD, the grad student community.
It's gorgeous to be here.
Good. So everything's going fine with the live, and what I'll do then is I'll just pause a little bit for a few seconds. I'll present you quickly, and then we'll go from there.
Gorgeous.
Awesome.
It's like you're doing magic. I'm just just watching you do the magic.
Yeah, it's anyway. It's this platform that I use, StreamYard. I really like it a lot, and because it does it is a little bit magical in a way. All right, so I'll let's start the recording. Welcome to this new episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Today I have the great pleasure of having with me Emma Brodzinski from the PhD Life Raft. I was going to say the PhD Life Raft podcast, but the PhD Life Raft is more than a podcast, and we'll talk about that. Emma is the host of the PhD Life Raft. Like I said, she is research associate in the Department of Drama, Theatre and Dance at Royal Holloway, University of London. And Emma practices as a therapist registered with HCPC. She's an experienced PhD supervisor and examiner, and has also acted as a Viva Committee Independent Chair. Viva. You say Viva, right?
It's like you say Viva or you say Viva. Viva Viva. Yes, yes. We say
What do
Viva.
you
We
prefer?
say Viva.
Viva, right? Perfect. And which here is like the PhD defense or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's different ways of saying it. Emma runs a range of courses and events, as well as providing well-being support programs for doctoral training programs. Most importantly, she's a mom to 13-year-old triplets, cats Fred and Ginger, and Amber the guinea pig. Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, Emma.
Thank you for having me. And I can hear Fred in the background, actually. So he might appear behind me at some point.
It's fine. It's fine. Animals are very well loved on the web, so it'll be a great a great
We're just
moment.
about to do a special episode, actually, on pets and the PhD, because
Oh, there
it's
we
a
go.
thing, right? So
It is a thing. So Emma, we crossed paths before. I've been on the PhD Life Raft podcast. Actually, I learned of the PhD Life Raft through a summit that you promoted, I think last year or anyway in the last year or so for graduate students. And immediately I wanted to check who you were, and eventually we chatted. And this interview was supposed to happen some time ago, and life happens, and it didn't. But hey, here we are today. Super happy
here
to
we
have you here.
are. It's so lovely, and it was such a great episode of you and all the wisdom that you shared. I'm really, really grateful, and it's lovely to be in your world now. This is great.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I'm really glad that you could participate, and you could come on the Beyond the Thesis mic, because you have so much experience, and you have this mission of supporting and of inspiring PhD students. And as if the listeners, if you listen to the show for a while, you know, inspiration and support are key for a healthy graduate school experience. And and yeah, do you want to share? You know, we talked about your animals. We talked about what you do for work. Is there anything else you want to share pertaining to how you came about this mission of helping and supporting graduate students?
I do want to say I feel like a bit of a charlatan, just first of all, in terms of
Yeah,
Beyond the Thesis, because of course I'm still in that. I'm still,
it's fine. It's fine.
it's like when I was working as a lecturer and I was the careers advisor. And I was like, this is ridiculous because I'm still at school. I can't be advising on the career. So I feel like I have to put that out there straight away. Yeah, in terms of coming to this work, it's a journey, isn't it? And I think that it's comes from the two big interests. So first of all, as an academic and having that experience as an academic, obviously doing my own PhD, supervising other people, being in that realm, and also then working as a therapist and having this kind of interest in mental health and supporting people, and had that particular interest on faculty, and then realised that actually support for undergraduates is getting better, particularly in the UK. I think it is getting better. Not brilliant and still a massive way to go, but it is getting better. Whereas for doctoral candidates, first of all, I think there's very particular challenges which the PhD throws up for people. And then in addition to that, also not particularly developed support strategies for doctoral candidates. So I think that concern then led me to start, in discussion with others. There's some wonderful people that I've worked with along the way. So starting to do work around that, which then led to kind of workshops and things like that. And then realizing that there were people who came to the workshops, and that was amazing. But there were also lots of people who didn't come to the workshop. And those people who didn't want to show up to be in a kind of mental health workshop or whatever. And I was like, okay, how could we meet those people? And that then led into the podcast, but now has led into bigger things around that. So yeah, so that's how I've got to do what I'm doing now.
Excellent. And so I'm really interested, especially having your background also in psychology. I'm really interested in the fact that you have like your fingers on the pulse of the graduate student community where you are, but which I'm sure is a microcosm of the graduate student community at large. And I'd really love to explore with you your experience, and of course without disclosing any any specific information, but in general you know, strokes, brush strokes, what are the challenges today in 2023 that are top of mind when you think of, you know, the community of graduate students? What problems are they dealing with that are, let's say, hindering them the most in having a healthy, happy, productive journey through graduate school?
Blimey. Right. Well, I think the PhD process is a huge challenge, and that people come into that for all sorts of reasons. And it is a transformational process, which I think people aren't always totally switched onto. That they're coming in to do a research project, and they kind of get that bit, but actually that journey towards being a doctor, as you know, means that you'll end up a different person than you started out. And that is huge, because I think people don't necessarily realize they're signing up for a transformational, exactly. And I always say, because I mean it, that I think that the PhD is a personal development program, and you get your thesis as a kind of bonus. And so that is a challenge in itself, in terms of like, oh my goodness, now the way in which I'm approaching the world is changing, the way in which I'm organizing my time is changing, you know, the relationships around me are changing. So I think that is a huge challenge. And within that, there's this sense of coming into yourself. I think this sense of and all that can mean, because as we know, you go into an undergraduate program, and people coming into a postgraduate obviously have done very well on undergraduate and masters, and you go into those programs and you are the high flyer, and you people set you questions and you answer them and you are super smart, and then you get into research work and it is very different. It's a very different thing. You have to nobody's going to set you a question. You have to set yourself a question, and you have to teach yourself the material, and then you have to answer the question as well. So I think that sense of, it's the same thing again in terms of being in the process, that actually that process in itself is challenging for people because it's disorientating. It's like being kind of snowblind. It's like, well, what am I doing here? And I have always been the smart one, and now I don't know exactly what I'm doing, and that can be really difficult and disorientating. So I think that's the kind of big headline stuff, quite apart from the fact that life will carry on lifing at you even if you're doing a PhD. So a lot of people have childcare issues, relationship issues, money worries, trying to work and do the PhD. So I think that there's all of that around it. So that's a big answer, but I think that they are big things that people are trying to deal with. Yeah,
of course. No, and the PhD is a big chunk of your life.
Yeah,
and so it's natural that the questions are big, and the challenges are of a certain scale. Now, I really like that the name that you chose for the platform to lead this mission of support and of inspiration, the PhD Life Raft. And I'm gonna kind of take it into a little bit of a humorous, but anyway, you'll understand what I'm building a PhD Life Raft. What are the main pieces I need to build this life raft?
blimey, right, okay. Space. I think space. It's massive. There's room to to take up the space that you need to take. I think that's really important. I think people come. I chose the life raft because of what it signals, in terms of like, you can grab onto this, it's all right, it's a safe space, like it's safe, you're okay, someone sees you swimming around and you can get on. But I think once you're on it, first of all, there's enough space, you can take up the space you need, and you can kind of make yourself cozy, find a cozy corner. But also there will be lots of other people on it too. You're not on your own, and I think that's really important. And lots of other people will totally get it, because again, as we both know, that experience of doing a PhD can be incredibly lonely, and that is truly paralyzing as well, in terms of like, I'm on my own. So this sense of lots of other people, I think lots of refreshments, obviously you need, but this sense of pleasure, sustenance, nurturing, and nurturing not in a kind of like, oh, it's all going to be all right, because actually, sadly, it isn't going to be all right. It's going to be tough and it's going to be difficult. So I think that's not what we do in terms of going, it's okay. But it's like, but it's okay. There are strategies here. So I suppose I'd also say, like a first aid kit, in terms of there's things there that will help, you'll go, oh yeah, no, that's useful for me, I could put that on, or that. So I wonder if I've reached the end of my metaphor, but I hope that answers the question.
It does answer the question. And community. So you mentioned community, you mentioned self-care, in other words. And I think they are important. And I'm going to now maybe ask the same question in a different way, just changing the point of view. What are people, when people are preparing for this adventure that is the PhD, and preparing their backpack, what are mistakes that they're doing? What are key things that they are forgetting, that are different from what you just mentioned? So what are points that you should focus on when embarking on the PhD? Let's say you're in your master's, and what are very strategic and helpful processes or uh, you know or reflections that you can have and things that you can do to help you be more prepared.
Right then, I think probably it's an adventure, so you kind of have to be open to that. I think that you are setting off on an adventure, and that will be thrilling and also petrifying in equal measure, probably. So I think knowing that is what you're doing, and I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to do another course. So I think don't think you're doing another course. That isn't what you're doing. Don't think that you're going to have a teacher. Don't think that's what your supervisor is going to do, because that isn't what they're there to do. They're there as a colleague, they're there as a kind of mentor, but they are not going to teach you. So I think to know that you are going to be your own teacher, you are going to be your own. I talk about it being like the CEO of the PhD. That's what you're doing. You're setting up a project. That's what you're going to be doing, and you're going to be CEO, and all that means in terms of heading up a project, calling people in, drawing on other expertise in order to move your project forward. So I think that's really important. I kind of said your backpack really is going to look like a CEO's briefcase, I think, probably more than a backpack. So you're not really a student in that way, I guess, but like any sort of entrepreneur, you're setting off an adventure, and you're going to be following leads, and you're going to be making some mistakes, and you're going to be meeting exciting people, and you're going to be having amazing ideas. So all that means too. So it's an entrepreneur's, I don't know what sort of bag they'd have, whatever sort of bag they'd have.
Yeah,
that's what you've got.
Attaché case or something like that.
There you go. Stylish, yet able to, do
practical. Yeah,
exactly. There you go.
I really like it, and I'm taking note that you're mentioning something again and again that I will come back to. But I love this metaphor of the CEO, the business person versus the student. And actually, I've had conversations with people at the beginning of the podcast when it was called just Papa PhD. A student who now she has her PhD. She said, I no longer refer to myself in conversation as a PhD student. I refer to myself as a PhD researcher.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, it really does change the way you feel about yourself when you're in a conversation, but also the way people will react to you. And I've had this issue in other contexts. When I arrived here in Montreal, in the context of getting an apartment, with me and this other guy from France were visiting apartments, and as soon as we said we hadn't had this reflection, and as soon as we had PhD students, then the conversation changed, and often it was like, oh, sorry, no, we don't take students. And anyway, so the fact that you're kind of equating it to more of an entrepreneurial endeavor is really interesting to me. And now it brings me to this other thing that you've mentioned again and again: meeting cool people, meeting different people. And you also said a few minutes ago that the PhD can be quite lonely. So how important first is this aspect of meeting people during your PhD outside of your kind of small circle, and how do you go about implementing a way of including it in your routine, in your opinion?
Yes, so I think it is important, but I think it's finding your people, and that's the challenge, isn't it? Because your people might not be in your department, your people might not be people who you are living with. They might, so it's kind of they'll all have roles, I think, and I think you want to know that you've got, if to go back to my metaphor of the kind of board of directors, you've got a big board of directors, you've got lots of seats at the table, but and so being on the lookout for the people that you want to draw in. So, and those will be different in the different phases of the PhD. I think you absolutely need to have people who are cheerleaders all the way through and just think you're brilliant and are going to remind you of that. So get those get those on board straight away, I'd say. And those people might be the people that you live with, and they might be your family, and they might be long-term friends. They might be people that you have hobbies with, that you're doing things outside of your research. I think that's really important to remember, and things that you kind of can go, my netball team think I'm amazing, and so you can kind of remember that. So you want that. And then you when I was saying that your people might not be those people, in terms of the people in terms of thing that will move your research forward. So it's kind of thinking about on that board. So you're going to have cheerleaders, you're going to have people who are really great in terms of project management, for example. You might have people who help you with those kind of technical things. Your supervisors obviously are going to be on there with their sort of subject specific advice and knowledge. You will want to have some people who are on that journey with you. I think it's really useful to have people who are at the same sort of phase of the PhD as you are, just to, because they'll get it. They'll get the thing where you go, I found that citation, and other people will be like, I don't even know why that's exciting to you. Or, I got an abstract accepted, and you need people who absolutely get why that's such a big deal. But it might be, as I just said, that in your department, you are the only person who's focusing on this particular subject area. So you might then want to have people. So in your department, you might have people working at the same sort of phase as you, and that's brilliant. Get them on board. But then you might want to be a little bit more, what's the word? It's not really strategic even, is it? It's just kind of thinking a bit further than where you're sitting. So subject organisations are brilliant for that, in terms of they're quite likely to have a sort of postgrad wing. And so, if you are a medieval historian, for example, there's probably going to be a subject area group that you could join, and that will have people who have a particular interest there. Conferences are brilliant for that, because you can go and find your conference that has the sort of people that you feel like, they're on a similar sort of journey, even if it's multidisciplinary and they're not actually particularly in your discipline, but they're just thinking about things in the same sort of way. They've got the same sort of reference points as you, or they just approach the material in a similar way. You also might want to just kind of go completely left field. And for example, somebody was working on Victorian literature, I think it was, and was struggling to find people who were really excited about the particular thing that they were looking at, but then found a sort of local history group who had a particular interest there. So it wasn't that it was actually an academic group, but they had a really focused interest. And of course, other people will be working in community groups, and they will have sort of stakeholders in their project. And so kind of being around those people who are excited about the material that you're looking at, who are talking about it every day. So I think it's casting your net wide, really, and knowing that you've got lots of seats to fill. This is also really important for not just having, because I think quite often people get into that, it's my supervisor, that's it, that's who I'm focusing on. If we were in relationship counselling, we would always say, never have just one person be everything to you. That's a recipe for disaster. And quite often people get into that relationship with their supervisor, and then that becomes really difficult, because your supervisor cannot be everything for you. And then because things might get a bit bumpy in that relationship, then what happens? Your supervisor might go off on leave, or be really busy with other things. Then what happens? So having lots of people who can support you, and in different ways and in different times, I think is really important. And also you get to choose them too, right? You didn't necessarily get to choose your supervisor, although I would say do have a strong hand in that if you possibly can. But you do get to choose the other people who kind of speak to your work and are involved in your work. You want to make sure there are people there that can give you positive feedback on your work. You want to have people there who, I think also you might want to have people who are accountability partners, who you're a little bit scared of. And if you say this week I'm going to be doing that, they're going to hold you to account. So I think about what's really useful for you, what you'd like around your board table, and then call it in.
That's amazing, and I really like this idea of a board of directors of sorts, and of having people who are outside, who contribute to what you do to in different ways, but that a bunch of them actually don't have any expectations, or don't they have no skin in the game, basically, from your work specifically. They
Yeah,
will be there as they'll give you their feedback, they'll bounce ideas with you, but it's not the same as your supervisor, who has invested in you succeeding in your project in a certain way.
yeah.
And anyway, it's really, really interesting. Now, this this metaphor of the CEO made me think, as you were talking of all of this is within the PhD, of course. I wonder whether some of the students you work with come with questions of what happens after, because one of the things you hear, especially in the startup, in the when someone is building a startup, is they have an exit strategy. And one of my reflections, um, throughout these last few years, and lately, is when you're in the PhD, when you're in graduate school, it feels like you are, like, time stops in a certain way,
Uh,
but it doesn't. Society keeps going on, the job market evolves, and you will have to exit at a certain point. It's coming. You'll exit. 20% of people can exit to academia and to tenure, but then the other 80% will have to exit to the rest of the job market. It can be academic non-tenure, and there's different paths, but a lot of people will have to scramble, or at least scramble if they don't prepare beforehand. And that's my mission, is actually to tell them to prepare beforehand. But do people come to you with questions on this part of, okay, I'm at year, in the UK it's 3 years of PhD, right? I'm at
yeah.
year two. Maybe I'm thinking, I'm not going to say in research. How do I prepare for what comes after? Is it something you cover with them?
Well, no, that's where you're the expert at
That's
this.
me. Okay,
So,
okay.
but what I do talk a lot about is the ending, because, as you say, actually, people go into this process and then they don't really think about the end, apart from, oh, it'll be brilliant when it's the end.
Mhm,
Or I've got to get to the end, it's going to be amazing at the end. And then not necessarily acknowledging that the end might be really difficult, really painful, really frightening, and that causes problems in itself. So I think, as you say, I think, and as a good therapist, we think about the ending at the beginning in terms of, like, what
love that.
might the ending be? What kind of ending would I like for myself? And so that we're always kind of seeding that in as we go along, and knowing that is coming. Because it's like with life, isn't it? Then it throws it into focus in terms of really enjoying that PhD process as much as you can and getting as much out of it as you can. I always say people should have a bucket list for their PhD. Like, what am I going to do while I'm doing the PhD? What would I like to experience? What would I like to explore? Thinking about, either I'm going to do it now because I'm not going to be able to do it later, or I'm going to do it now because that might lead me in an interesting direction. So I think that kind of that is really worth thinking about. And then as you come towards the end, I think it's important, because I think the end can often brings up, and as I say, I have to approach this kind of more from a therapeutic point of view, but the end can bring up a lot of grief in terms of coulda, woulda, shoulda, what might have happened, oh, this, and that's can be really difficult. But acknowledging that it is what it is, that you've kind of been through this process, that you're reflecting on a process that you've been through, you will have learned a lot and you will have experienced a lot, and then reflecting on that, having a process of what I call kind of honorable closure, so that then you're able to move forward into the next part of the journey. And I do think it is really useful to think about, in those end stages, what comes next, because as you will know as well, someone described it to me as the kind of void that people kind of just go to the submission. They're just going to the submission, and then after that, there's just a void.
Yeah.
And I think it's that sense, isn't it, of what they say. I'm not a runner, but they say run beyond the line, don't they? Run beyond the line. Know what you're going to do after, even if it's then I'm going to go on a big holiday, or then I'm going to be, doing, I've got this project, or then I'm going to be starting to think about making contacts with people because of whatever, so that your life doesn't end when the PhD ends. Because a lot of people, as you all know, get really burnt out. They get very depressed after they've submitted. And it can be a really tricky moment. So yes, but you are much more the expert in terms of what that means in terms of careers, because as I say, beyond the thesis, I'm an imposter because I'm in the thesis still.
No. But let's say I am exploring that aspect with each guest that comes on the show. But I really, for example, you en passant, you said the term honorable closure. I'd like for you to expand on it a little bit, but I just want to mention one thing, which is it's really related to what you just said about the importance of thinking about the after early on. But I've had a handful of interactions with grad students in the last few weeks, one even today, and the person today said, oh yeah, no, I have your podcast on my list to listen, but I don't want to. You're talking about after. I'm going to listen to it once I'm done, and I've just submitted. I'm going to defend in November, and then I'm going to listen to Beyond the Thesis. And in my head, I'm thinking, no, you should start now. You should have started 6 months ago. And it's not the first time. And I had the same type of interaction a week ago with like 3 or 4 grad students, and they were like, oh yeah, no, it's even stressful to think about it. I'm not interested in listening to that until I'm done. And that's a big obstacle for me, because and I think it aligns with what you just said. My idea, and I'm really convinced that the key for this healthy closure, and I'll let you talk about that more, is to start early, even if it's just what's the term what's that type of medicine where they dilute and dilute and dilute? Oh my gosh! Even if it's in really tiny amounts at the beginning, so it doesn't stress you. But even those tiny amounts, and wow, it's a very common word, and now it's these pharmacists who it's like a different.
Like a prophylactic, is it?
No, it's not prophylactic. It's even a lot of people take those medicines, but then the skeptics usually are like it's just water. And then I can cut this part in the audio, but
homeopathic,
yeah. Even if it's in homeopathic amounts in the beginning,
right.
Let's say once every 2 months you do a little bit of thinking forward, 3 years forward. Just in homeopathic amounts, it would be, thank you Emma, it would be very positive already. But I'd like to have and we're reaching the half-hour point now, but I'd like to have your point of view on that, but maybe talk about this honorable closure concept a little bit more, because I find it really interesting. Just the term is interesting to me.
So honorable closure then comes from a kind of a shamanic perspective. So in terms of this kind of soul work, and I think that PhD work is soul work, but this sense of truly honoring what we've been through, because we can kind of want different things for ourselves, but life is going to happen. So this sense of acknowledging that all that happens to us is important, and it has an impact, and that we've been through that experience. So that's important that we acknowledge that, but also to not hold on to things, because if we hold on to things, we're still anchored in the past, and actually we want to be able to move forward to the next phase of things. And we want to be able to, not to kind of go, oh well, that's it, and I'm just, because that's the two options, isn't it? Either we remain anchored in the past, or we just go, I'm shutting that door and I'll forget about it and I'll move. So actually this is about not doing either of those things. So a lot of it is about gratitude. It's about really sitting with I've just experienced all of this, and what can I be grateful for in that? What have I learned in that? What do I now know about myself or other people or the world? So this sense of kind of really reflecting with gratitude on that, and then acknowledging that was an important experience that you've been through, and then often having some kind of ritual practice that really does honor what all of that was. And from a shamanic perspective, we call on the elements for that. So either earth, air, fire, or water. So you might plant something in the ground. So you might create a little ritual for yourself. So you plant something in the ground, or fire is such a powerful element. You might, light up, we have candles, don't we? Or write something and write the things that you want to let go of, and then set fire to them and watch them go up into the ether. So this sense of knowing that you're in this moment now, that you're going to honor what has been, but then also allow yourself to let go of what you're not going to take with you, and hold in your heart what you are going to take with you as you go forwards. And then perhaps some sort of ritual practice that really marks that moment, how significant it is, and that you're going to move forward. But if you didn't want to do the more of the woo-woo end bit in terms of the ritual practice, really just having that kind of a reflecting with gratitude for what has been, because the kind of the toxic bit is when we kind of go, oh, I should have done it like that, and it should have been like that. Is that what it was? That experience, that's the experience that you've had, and that's what you can acknowledge and go, yeah, I appreciate that, or this has set me in this direction. So I think to take a moment to do that, rather than just, especially with a PhD, this is a huge life journey that you've been on, and to kind of go, right, okay, on to the next thing. That's wow. So this sense of just kind of acknowledging and as I say, honoring all that was part of it, all the difficult bits as well as all the amazing bits too.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it feels to me like it could be almost a daily practice, even what you're saying.
Yes.
Difficulties arise every day, especially in a PhD. Now, it's very interesting to me, and it makes me, the image you're giving me is of someone, as a graduate student who is very rooted, who lives the moment, and who's able to, have small, who's able to let go of some things quickly, and if they are not useful or not positive, etc., and maybe even thank them for having happened and for the lessons you've learned from them. But sometimes it's hard, and one of the things that I remember is, well, I changed continents to come do to come do my PhD, and a lot of people do change, maybe cities, but also countries and continents, etc. And then I feel that the culture, the culture kind of often pushes you to start shedding some of your core elements of your identity, and adopting this new identity, which is, I'm now a scholar, I'm now an academic, I'm now a researcher, I no longer do theater, or I no longer do whatever, martial arts, etc. And it feels that I'd like to know first if this is something you see, and then whether this might hinder the fact that you're kind of gelling into this image you have of maybe seeing your supervisors and people that you admire in the domain, and whether that cannot hinder you in this attitude of, I am a being that is changing every day, and I am my own being, and a failure at the lab is not a failure of me, it's just a failure at the lab, and I'm going to learn with it. And because a lot of what I see is people dealing with shame and failure and feelings of failure, just for the fact of not staying in academia, for example, at the end of their PhD. I don't know if this was too convoluted, but I wonder if this elicits some reflection on your side.
Yeah, no, this is huge, isn't it? This is huge, and this is the kind of the existential journey of the PhD. It's like we were saying, that that's the big project of the PhD is you. which is, as we said at the beginning, which nobody really expects that they're signing up for that. They think they're doing research project,
Yeah.
but actually it is much bigger than that. And I think that this sense of becoming a scholar, I think it's really a useful question to ask yourself in terms of what sort of scholar do you want to be. And that's not an easy question to answer, because there's a kind of could be quite a limited, where you are, could be quite a limited range of options for you in terms of what you see there as role models, but you can seek them out. And it comes back to the board of directors in terms of who do you want on your board of directors, who might you I remember, and I held on to it because it made me laugh so much. I'm hearing somebody at a conference talking about saying she used to say to herself, what would Dolly Parton do? No, she used to say to herself, what would Goldie Hawn do? In faculty meetings, what would Goldie Hawn do? And it made me laugh. And I used to sort of say that to myself, like, well, what could Goldie Hawn do in this situation? And that it was this sense of making yourself the sort of scholar that you want to be, because that's really important, that you do have integrity and you do have a sense of yourself, a grounded sense of yourself. Firstly, to make sure that you are able to do the research that you want to do, because otherwise you'll be like, oh, should it be like this? Should it be like that? That person thinks it should be this. That person thinks it should be like that. This might be more tricky, I recognise, for those who are working in a lab, in a group, in a lab, but equally having your own sense of self in that can be really important. You know, I am the sort of person who, whatever it is, I'm going to have the role models, and seeking out different types of role models. And as I say, it might not be Goldie Hawn. It might be that you kind of like, actually that academic does the work in a way that I would like to do it, and I'm going to just hold them in my mind as a kind of role model. But also remembering that you are, what sort of human being do you want to be? Because there is that kind of cultish aspect of academia that wants all of you. It wants all of you, and it will suck you in, and so that you don't have a kind of sense of yourself beyond it. And that, just like in a kind of cultish situation, is dangerous, because if you are on your own in this different kind of environment, and you're doing what you're told, you then can lose a sense of who you are. You become very vulnerable in that way. So having the people, again, I think it comes to having the people around you grounding you. You are bigger than the PhD project. You really are, whatever that means for you. And we were saying at the beginning, in terms of pets, it could be that you walk your dog every day, and that kind of helps you to remember that there are other things going on in my life. There are things that are more important. So I think that's a kind of rambling answer, but this sense of, yes, having perspective. It is really important that you're going to have your kind of scholarly identity, but that scholarly identity will be part of a bigger picture of you as a person. And that scholarly identity will be bigger than the particular group that you're in, because, you know, you might end up going to work in a completely different lab with a completely different culture. And you'll only know if that lab's going to suit you if you really know what sort of person you are, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it's a great reflection. I'm super happy that we're having this conversation, because it's clearly it's something you've reflected upon, and also that because of your knowledge of psychology, you think and you talk about it a different way, which I find really interesting. One thing that just struck me is you are bigger than the PhD. It sounds so simple, and yet it's never come up in a conversation, and I think it's very strong. And often you do think, when you're in there, you think, no, I'm small and I need to conform. And I've talked with people from different minorities, African American, and you need to conform even in other ways. You need to code switch, etc. And it's really, anyway, this conversation is really fulfilling and going beyond my expectations.
Oh, bless you. And let's not, I mean, what I don't want to do is kind of dismiss all of those really complex structural issues, because, as I say, there is a cultish aspect to academia. There are also all sorts of structural issues in academia which we need to attend to and address. And this makes it easier for some people to go, okay, you know, I can take some control in this situation, because there are going to be people who have are more vulnerable than others in that sort of situation. But for everybody to have their people be grounded and be supported in remembering how important and amazing they are, because that's the bit that really brought me into this work. Is it literally broke my heart seeing these amazing, switched on, smart people with so much that they want to do and so much that they can offer, feeling incapable, small, stupid, like they shouldn't be there. And it's like, if you feel like you shouldn't be there, you absolutely should be there. Do you know what I mean? If you feel like you shouldn't be there, you're exactly the sort of people who should be there, because that's what's going to shift dialogue. You know, that this is what the scholarly community should be about, isn't it? It should be challenging orthodoxy and thinking about things from different perspectives. That's absolutely what we need. So yeah, I think that I'll get off my soapbox now, but I do feel really passionate about it.
No, I was going to try and get a final quote from you, and you just gave it to me like that in a silver platter. Emma, we're reaching the end of the interview, sadly. But sadly, but not sadly, I'm super happy that we've had this conversation. I hope we continue it on other, other platforms, or because these are things that are not easy to talk about, not easy to find language around, and I really like how you were able to communicate them in a very simple and warm way.
Bless you, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I think really, it has been a real pleasure to find you and to find people, because I think equally as people working to support PhD researchers, we need community too, don't we? We need to know, because often what we're doing is kind of countercultural, and actually having, to me, this feels very precious to have that somebody else who kind of gets why this is important. So thank you for that.
Well, it's totally my pleasure. And now, before we really end this live recording, if people want to say thank you for something you said, just ask you questions, how is the best way for them to reach out to you? On what platforms can they find the PhD Life Raft? Can you just quickly share that info?
So in terms of social media, I'm mostly on Instagram at PhD Life Raft. And then on my website, which is phdliferaft.com. And then in terms of the podcast, that's on most podcasts. So is it a server? I don't even know what it's called. You know, where you get your podcast, it's likely to be there.
So on all the common podcast platforms, and it's just PhD Life Raft.
That's right.
I will share all of those in the episode's show notes. Emma, this has been a great pleasure. Like I said, I usually try to get a final quote, but I think you just nailed it in the last few minutes. What I feel that I've learned with you today, and I kind of want to learn more and learn more about it. Maybe trying to look back at what we've talked. The thing that's staying with me as a kind of overarching theme is you are bigger than the PhD, and I remember feeling really small during the PhD. If you're able to not feel small, it's going to help you a lot. But I think the keys to not feeling small are, first, not isolating yourself, and this is also something you've said and you reinforce, which is the importance of having a village, of having a board of directors, of having a community around you. That means that you're not alone with your supervisor in that whole adventure, but that you have champions, you have people with peers with whom you can discuss and exchange ideas, and you can have kind of board members who can be like more mentor like, and that have no expectation, or will gain nothing from the results of your research, but the pleasure of seeing you succeed. And I think that's very, very important. And of course, it's depending. I myself am an introvert mostly, and it's not easy to go. And I know some people, and I've talked with students with whom I was, I talked to the group of students. I said, you need to reach out to different people. Use LinkedIn. It's kind of easy. And then a few came and said, even on LinkedIn, I feel, I don't know, I feel uneasy to go and bug someone that I don't know. They're probably busy. And I always try to massage the idea that if people are on LinkedIn, it's because they're kind of open to that. But uh, if you're listening and if you are alone and if you're starting, add one person, add two people, have a little bit of a tribe form around you, because going it alone is really really tough.
Yeah.
This would be for me the key thing, is not staying alone. But then you shared so much more. The last thing that I want to mention, then, that I find really interesting, has to do with the concept of honorable closure, and with the importance of thinking of the last day of your PhD throughout your PhD, and not leaving it just for that last
Yeah.
day to think
Yeah.
about it, because it will help you in many different ways. Emma, this has been great. I don't know if you have a last word based on what I said, but
Well, I think this sense of, I think just reminding each other that, or being reminded of how amazing it is that you're doing. It is an amazing thing to do a PhD. It is amazing. So, yeah, enjoy that.
okay. um, Emma, thank you so much.
Thank
This has
you.
been a pleasure. I hope we keep on talking. And I didn't mention it. Well, I did mention it quickly. You have promoted last year, or in the past year, a summit, a PhD Life Raft summit. I'd love to, maybe for us to collaborate in that context. For everyone listening, I hope you have taken some notes. If not, re-listen to the episode, because there's so much value in there. Thank you for being here, for those who have been here live, and see you on the next episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD.
Thank you very much.